Everyone thinks I confessed because guilt finally cracked me open, but the truth is I stood in our kitchen and lied straight to Alex's face about sleeping with Jake at his work party because I thought a phantom affair would hurt him less than what's actually happening to me. They see a woman who self-destructed her relationship for a cheap thrill, who doesn't deserve the apartment we built together, or the 2 years of Sunday morning coffee rituals. But they don't know that the lease I'm about to lose was already half abandoned in my mind weeks before I ever stepped into that open bar downtown, or that Alex's silence isn't punishment. It's precisely what I engineered, even though it makes me want to crawl out of my skin. I need to tell you what really went down that night, why I manufactured a confession from thin air, and the medical file I've been hiding in my desk drawer that makes every choice I've made since look almost reasonable. I moved to Austin for Alex's startup job 18 months ago, leaving behind a Chicago apartment I'd lovingly restored and friends who actually return my texts. At the time, it felt romantic, chasing his dream across state lines, proving I could be the flexible partner. I work remotely as a copywriter, which really means I spend 10 hours a day talking to my houseplants and refreshing my inbox. Alex's world expanded exponentially upon arrival: team lunches, rock climbing with coworkers, a boss who quoted Marcus Aurelius during stand-ups. Mine contracted to the square footage of our overpriced 2-bedroom, where I started noticing small things that made my fingers go numb. I'd forget the word for spatula while making eggs. I'd lose entire afternoons, finding myself in the grocery store with no memory of driving there. When I mentioned it to Alex, he suggested I needed a hobby, maybe join a running club. He didn't see the terror pooling behind my eyes because his own vision was filled with seed funding and product launches. The party invitation arrived on a Tuesday, printed on heavy cardstock that felt expensive. Alex's company had secured Series B funding, and the founder was throwing a celebration at a converted warehouse downtown. I spent 3 hours trying on outfits, each one exposing a version of myself I no longer recognized. My reflection showed a woman whose hands trembled when she raised her arms, whose face had developed a hollow quality I couldn't filter away. Alex walked in while I was staring at myself, and he said, "You'll look great in anything, babe," before answering a Slack message. That's when I decided something I'm still not proud of. If he was going to look through me, I would become someone worth looking at, even if I had to invent her from scratch. Walking into that warehouse felt like stepping onto a foreign planet where everyone spoke venture capital. Alex got swallowed by a circle of engineers discussing Kubernetes within 5 minutes, leaving me with a vodka soda and a desperate need to seem occupied. I drifted toward the bar, where Jake from marketing offered to refresh my drink. He had the kind of smile that assumed everyone already liked him, and for some reason, I found that comforting rather than obnoxious. We talked about terrible apartment complexes and the best breakfast tacos, and I didn't mention Alex once. When Jake's hand brushed my lower back to guide me through the crowd, I let it linger for 3 seconds too long. My brain, already misfiring in ways I'd refused to acknowledge, recorded the sensation as evidence. By my third drink, I'd convinced myself this was justified research. Alex needed to feel what it was like to have me slip through his fingers. Jake needed a fascinating woman to flirt with. I needed to prove I still existed outside our couch and my laptop screen. So I laughed louder at his jokes, touched his arm when he spoke, and when he suggested we step outside for fresh air, I followed him into the alley where the string lights didn't reach. Nothing happened. Not really. He leaned in, I turned my head, his lips caught my cheek. It lasted half a second. But in the version I would later construct for Alex, that half second became an entire night of abandon. The lie began forming before I even rejoined the party, my mind already building the architecture of a confession that would be too vivid to question. Alex didn't notice I'd been gone. He was deep in conversation with his boss, gesturing passionately about user acquisition costs. I watched him from across the room, memorizing the way his hair fell over his forehead, the exact pitch of his laugh. I was cataloging details of a man I was preparing to exorcise from my life, and the cruelty of that act hit me so hard I had to steady myself against a concrete pillar. That's when Sarah from HR approached, her face creased with concern. "You don't look well," she said, her voice carrying an unexpected gentleness. "Is everything okay with you and Alex?" I plastered on a smile so bright it hurt my teeth, and told her I was just tired from deadline stress. But her question landed like a diagnosis, confirming what I already suspected. I was no longer passing for normal. The ride home was silent, except for Alex's phone buzzing with congratulations from coworkers. I stared out at the dark highways, watching Austin's skyline shrink in the side mirror, feeling the phantom of Jake's near kiss burning on my cheek like a brand. Alex reached for my hand at a red light, his thumb rubbing circles on my palm in the gesture he'd used since our first date. I almost cracked then, almost spilled the truth about my disappearing memory and the neurologist appointments I'd been hiding. Instead, I let my hand go limp, creating a distance I could point to later as evidence of my guilt. When we walked into our apartment, I headed straight for the bedroom while Alex checked his email one last time. I listened to the familiar rhythm of his typing and thought about how much I would miss that sound when I was gone. I waited until Sunday morning, when Alex was making his ritual pour-over coffee, the one thing he never rushed. I sat at our kitchen island, my hands wrapped around a mug I'd bought at a pottery studio we visited on our first anniversary. "I need to tell you something about Friday night," I said, my voice steady as a surgeon's hand. Alex turned, the coffee carafe still in his grip, and the look on his face was so open, so trusting, that I nearly choked on the words I'd rehearsed. But I powered through, describing a fictional encounter with Jake that grew more elaborate with each sentence. I mentioned the alley, the string lights, the way his hands felt on my skin. I gave details no one would think to invent, the smell of his cologne, the texture of his shirt, the exact words he whispered. Alex set the carafe down so carefully it didn't make a sound, which was somehow worse than if he'd smashed it. He didn't yell. He just looked at me like I was a stranger who'd walked into his home uninvited, then picked up his keys and walked out. The door clicked shut with a finality that echoed through my bones. The first 3 days of his absence were almost peaceful. I told myself this was the plan working, the sacrifice accomplishing its purpose. I ate cereal for dinner and watched reality shows we'd always promised to binge together. I didn't check my phone, didn't answer when friends texted asking where Alex was. On day 4, I started receiving messages from Jake on Instagram, confused and apologetic. "Hey, I heard you told Alex we hooked up," he wrote. "I think there's been a misunderstanding. I would never." I blocked him before he could finish, then deleted the entire conversation. That night I created a fake text conversation between us, time-stamped for Friday night, and left it visible on my phone's lock screen. When Alex finally came back for clothes on day 6, he saw it. I watched his face crumple from the hallway, watched him commit to memory the words I'd invented. He took his suits and his gaming console and didn't speak a single word to me. The silence felt like vindication and murder simultaneously. Sarah from HR called me the following week, her voice professional but strained. "Maya, I need to understand what happened at the party. Jake is being terminated for fraternization, and he's claiming nothing occurred." I sat on my balcony, watching a storm roll in over the Texas hills, and I lied again, smoothly, cruelly. "It was consensual," I said, each word a separate betrayal. "We were both drinking. I'm taking responsibility for my part." She was quiet for so long I thought she'd hung up. Then she said, "Alex is like a brother to me. You've broken something I can't fix." The line went dead, and I realized I'd managed to destroy not just my relationship, but Alex's work friendship and Jake's livelihood in one masterful stroke. The part of me that could feel horror at this was shrinking, being replaced by a numb certainty that this was all necessary. My hands shook as I opened my laptop and began drafting the sublease agreement I would need soon. My best friend Lena flew in from Chicago on day 12, letting herself in with the spare key I kept under the ceramic frog. She found me surrounded by takeout containers, the apartment smelling of neglect and lavender candles I'd been burning to mask the scent of my own decay. "You're not a cheater," she said, sitting on the coffee table to force eye contact. "You couldn't even flirt with the bartender at my bachelorette party. What the hell is actually going on?" I deflected, gave her the same performance I'd given Alex, but Lena knew my tells. She grabbed my wrists, her thumbs pressing into my pulse points. "You're sick," she whispered, and for a terrifying moment I thought she knew. But she meant mentally, emotionally, not physically. She meant I was broken in ways therapy could fix. I extricated myself from her grip and told her to leave, that she didn't understand what real love required. She cried in my doorway, saying I'd lost my mind, and I closed the door on her because she was right but not in the way she thought. Day 19, I drove to Alex's office parking garage and sat there for 3 hours, watching his silhouette move behind the third-floor windows. I wanted to see him in his natural habitat, the place I'd supposedly violated, to remind myself why this was worth it. He emerged with his boss, both of them laughing, and I saw the version of Alex I'd been holding back, all brightness and potential, unweighed by my terminal future. A security guard tapped on my window, asked if I was lost. I mumbled something about meeting someone and peeled out of the lot, nearly sideswiping a Prius. The near accident made my hands seize up, a tremor I couldn't control. It was the third one that week. When I got home, I found I'd forgotten to pay the electric bill, and the apartment was dark except for the red blinking light on the router. I sat in that darkness and admitted to myself what I'd been avoiding. The symptoms were accelerating. The email from Alex arrived on day 23, subject line blank, body containing 5 words, "What really happened, I know." My stomach dropped through the floor. I stared at those words until they blurred, trying to decode what he knew. Did he know about the neurologist, about the fake texts, about the way I'd orchestrated my own downfall like a composer writing his final symphony? I typed and deleted 7 different responses, each one more desperate than the last. In the end, I sent back one word: everything. It was technically true, but not in the way he would interpret it. His reply was immediate this time: don't, just don't. I interpreted that as permission to maintain the lie, to let him believe I'd been unfaithful, rather than reveal the truth that would chain him to my sinking ship. I printed the lease renewal form that arrived that afternoon, stared at the blank signature lines, and realized I was building my own coffin with bureaucratic precision. Day 31 brought the envelope from the senior living facility, the one I'd toured under a false name in early August. The brochure featured smiling seniors playing card games, their faces blurred just enough to seem happy rather than resigned. I'd put down a deposit on a studio unit, signing a 2-year lease that began the same week our apartment's renewal was due. The timing was intentional, a clean break. I hid the brochure in my desk drawer, beneath the neurologist's report that used phrases like rapid progression and significant cognitive decline. The words were clinical, but the meaning was a death sentence with a slightly longer timeline. That night, I drafted a confession letter to Alex that told the whole truth, about the diagnosis, the planning, the way I'd tried to spare him. Then I burned it in the sink, watching the paper curl and blacken because I realized the lie had become easier than the truth. The smoke alarm didn't even go off. Nothing in my life had working alerts anymore. On day 38, Lena called from the hospital in Chicago. "Mom fell," she said. "She's asking for you." I could hear the coded message beneath her words. This was serious. This was possibly the end. I sat on my packed suitcase, the one I'd been filling with things to take to the facility, and realized I couldn't go. I couldn't fly because I'd forgotten how to navigate airports. I couldn't face my mother's death because it was a preview of my own. I told Lena I was contagious with something, a lie so thin it was transparent. She didn't argue, just said, "You're scaring me," and hung up. I pulled out the neurologist's report and read the line about familial pattern of early onset and saw my entire mapped future. Alex deserved better than watching me become a stranger in his home. The affair I'd invented was a gift, really. A clean break he could hate me through, then heal from. The alternative was a slow-motion tragedy where he'd become my caregiver before he'd even turned 32. The certified letter arrived on day 41, Alex's signature required but redirected to my address. Inside was the formal notice our lease ended in 72 hours. He'd already signed his release, indicated he would not be renewing. The management company needed my decision by close of business Friday. I held that paper and felt the trap snap shut, the one I'd designed myself. I'd wanted him free, but I'd also wanted the door left slightly ajar, just in case. This slammed it closed with legal finality. I sat on our balcony until dawn, watching the city wake up, and for the first time I let myself imagine Alex's future without me. He would meet someone stable, someone who could remember anniversaries and hold coherent conversations at dinner parties. She wouldn't hide medical files or manufacture infidelities. She would be whole, and he would be happy, and this thought made me both want to survive and want to disappear completely. Day 43, I went to the apartment office to sign my release. The manager, a woman named Rosa who'd always been kind, asked if I was sure. "These rents have skyrocketed," she said. "You'll never find something this nice for the price." I appreciated her pragmatism, her focus on square footage rather than emotional devastation. I signed, my signature barely resembling the one on the original lease I'd signed with such hope. As I handed back the pen, I wondered if Alex had hesitated before signing his copy, if his hand had shaken. I would never know. That afternoon, I booked movers for the facility, scheduling them for the day after I was officially homeless. The cascade of endings felt appropriate, like dominoes falling in slow motion. I was orchestrating my own disappearance with such precision that part of me felt proud. The other part just felt gone already. On day 46, Alex's sister texted me. "He's a wreck, whatever happened, fix it or let him go for real." I stared at those words for an hour, trying to decode the subtext. Did she know? Had Alex figured it out and shared it with her? I typed, "I am letting him go," and hit send before I could second guess. Her reply was instant. "That's not your decision to make alone, asshole." I deleted the conversation, then her contact, then turned off my phone completely. She was right, of course. But she was also wrong, because she didn't understand that some decisions are made for you by your DNA, by the faulty proteins in your brain that are currently dismantling the person you used to be. I wasn't being noble. I was being expedient. The difference seemed important to maintain, even in my own head. Day 47, Alex appeared at the door. I knew it was him by the rhythm of his knock, 3 quick raps that used to signal "it's me, open up." I stood on the other side of the wood, my hand on the knob, and realized I couldn't see him because I was already forgetting his face in fragments. The exact shape of his eyebrows, the way his dimples appeared only on the left side when he smirked, these details were dissolving. He knocked again, then slid something under the door. A piece of paper with a single sentence, "Tell me why you did this." I pressed my palm against the paper, as if I could absorb his hand through it, then I did the hardest thing I've ever done. I didn't answer. I let him stand there for 10 minutes while I silently cried on the other side, counting down the seconds until I heard his footsteps retreat. The deadbolt I threw after he left felt like the final seal on my own tomb. The movers arrived at 9 on day 49, efficient and impersonal. I'd packed 37 boxes, a shocking accumulation of life reduced to cardboard. They took our books, the kitchen gadgets we'd registered for, the artwork we'd fought over and then learned to love. I kept only a small suitcase and the damning medical file. As they carried out the last box, I did a final walkthrough, running my fingers along the walls where our pictures had hung. In the bedroom, I found one of Alex's socks under the bed, and I held it to my face like a perverted souvenir. It smelled like his detergent, nothing more, but I stood there for 5 minutes breathing it in. The property manager did her final inspection, handed me my deposit check, and I drove away from the apartment we'd chosen together. In the rearview mirror, I watched it recede, thinking about how I'd managed to lose everything without anyone understanding that this was the goal all along. At the facility, they showed me to my studio, a compact space with a call button and safety rails in the bathroom. I unpacked my 37 boxes into a room designed for one, placing Alex's sock in the bottom drawer of my nightstand like a secret. The first night, I didn't sleep. I stared at the ceiling and practiced forgetting his name, just to see if I could. I couldn't. Not yet. But I knew the day would come when Alex would be just sounds, meaningless as static. That was the point of all of this, to spare him from watching that happen to me. I told myself this until the words became a prayer, a justification, the only story I could live with. The facility had a strict no-visitors policy for the first 30 days, which I'd requested specifically. By the time Alex could legally find me, I would be settled into my new identity as a woman without a past. A woman who destroyed her own life for reasons that would seem either insane or heroic depending on how much of the medical file you read. Day 51, I logged into my old email for the first time since moving. 73 messages, most of them from concerned friends I'd ghosted, a few from Lena demanding answers, one from Jake's lawyer mentioning potential defamation. I deleted them all except the one from Alex, sent at 2:47 a.m. "I know you didn't cheat. I saw the security footage from the alley. Nothing happened. So what the fuck is this really about?" I read it 12 times, each pass through the words registering differently. He knew, he'd always known. The ghosting, the silence, the clean break, they weren't him believing my lie. They were him waiting for me to tell the truth. I typed 6 different replies, ranging from "I'm dying" to "I made it all up." I settled on "You deserve better than what's left of me." It was cryptic enough to be honest while still protecting him from the full weight of my diagnosis. He read it immediately. The email showed seen, but he didn't respond. The 3 dots appeared, disappeared, appeared again, then nothing. I understood that this was his answer, his acceptance of my narrative, his refusal to play the role of rescuer I'd secretly been casting him in. Day 53, Lena called from Mom's hospital room. "She's asking for you. She keeps saying your name, but she thinks you're 12. My mother had been gone for years, really, her memories eroding in reverse chronological order. Now she lived in a perpetual 2003, where I was still a child who needed picking up from soccer practice. I told Lena I couldn't afford the flight, which was true but not the real reason. The real reason was I couldn't handle watching my future play out in real time, seeing the endgame of my genetic destiny. Lena's voice went cold. If you don't come, you'll regret it. Whatever you're running from, this is worse. She didn't know how right she was. That night, I had my worst episode yet. I woke up at 3 in the morning standing in the facility's common room, wearing only a t-shirt, with no memory of how I'd gotten there. The night nurse found me and led me back without judgment, but her clinical kindness felt like a sentence. I was progressing faster than the doctors predicted. My timeline was collapsing. On day 55, I received a package from Alex. Inside was our lease, unsigned by me, but with a note attached. The management company says you signed a release. I need to understand why you're doing this. No return address, no way to contact him beyond replying to the void. I held that paper, the last physical evidence of our shared life, and felt the last threads of my plan unraveling. I'd wanted to be the villain of his story because villains are final. They don't linger. They don't require caretaking. They walk away and let the hero heal and move on. But Alex wasn't accepting his role as the wronged party. He was investigating, pushing back, refusing to let me write the ending I thought he deserved. I stood at my facility window overlooking the garden where residents sat in wheelchairs, some talking to people who weren't there, some staring at flowers they no longer had names for, and I admitted something I'd been avoiding. I wasn't saving Alex. I was saving myself from the unbearable vulnerability of being truly seen in my deterioration. The final confrontation came on day 61, 3 days before the lease would have ended anyway. He showed up at the facility during visitor hours, having somehow found me despite my careful obfuscations. I saw him through the reinforced glass doors, looking younger than I remembered, more determined. The nurse asked if I wanted to see him. I said no. He stood outside for an hour, his face pressed to the glass, his breath fogging the window. I could read his lips forming my name, over and over. When security finally asked him to leave, he slid an envelope under the door, same as he'd done at the apartment. This one contained a single printed email from my neurologist, forwarded to him. Alex had found it somehow, maybe through my emergency contacts, maybe through sheer determination. The highlighted line read, "Patient is exhibiting signs of significant cognitive decline. Recommend immediate family notification." He'd underlined family 3 times. On the back he'd written, "You made me your ex instead of letting me be your family. That's the real betrayal." He was right. I'd spent months orchestrating my isolation, convincing myself that pushing him away was an act of love when it was really an act of cowardice. The facility doctor confirmed what I'd already pieced together. I was progressing through early-onset dementia at a rate that would leave me unable to care for myself within 18 months. Alex could have handled that. He would have learned to cook the meals I'd forget to eat, to coax me through the angry outbursts and lost words, to love a version of me that was disintegrating. But I couldn't handle being the object of that kind of sacrifice. So I gave him a story he could hate me through, a clean narrative of betrayal that would let him walk away with his pride intact. The problem with calculated sacrifices is they require you to be the only one doing the calculating. Now I'm sitting in the facility's garden, watching a woman named Margaret feed crackers to a pigeon she believes is her deceased husband. It's been 63 days since I told Alex I cheated. 63 days of him believing a lie I constructed with surgical precision. The lease on our life together has technically expired, but the emotional mortgage remains, accruing interest I can never pay back. Social media tells me Alex has moved to San Francisco for a new job, his Instagram showing him rock climbing with people who don't know I exist, his smile genuine and unburdened. My plan worked perfectly, which is the most devastating part. I got what I wanted, his freedom, at the cost of my own story being forever misunderstood. Lena still won't speak to me. Jake got his job back after I emailed his boss the truth, but his reputation is permanently stained. Sarah from HR sends me occasional updates about Alex, little breadcrumbs of his happiness that feel both like gifts and punishments. The reason I'm telling this story now, in this facility where I can no longer reliably remember what I ate for breakfast, is that yesterday I found the sock in my nightstand drawer. Alex's sock. And for a full minute, I couldn't recall who it belonged to or why I'd kept it. The panic of that moment, of feeling my plan to spare him evaporate into my own vanishing, made me realize I'd written the wrong ending. I thought I was giving him the gift of having me, but I was actually robbing him of the choice to love me through the hardest chapter. I was robbing myself of being truly known in the time I had left. The lease ended, but the real estate of our relationship is still there, vacant and waiting for someone to occupy it honestly. So I wrote him a letter today, the whole truth this time, no protective narratives or calculated omissions. I don't know if he'll read it or if he can even reach me through the walls I've built. But I had to try, because the cruelest thing I did wasn't inventing an affair. It wasn't letting him believe I was a cheater. It was refusing to let him be the partner he wanted to be, the man who would have chosen the slow, painful truth over the swift, clean lie every single time. Am I the villain here? That's what I ask myself when the nurses do their rounds and I catch my reflection in the darkened window. I set out to be the hero of his story, the one who took the hit so he could thrive. Instead, I became the architect of my own solitary confinement, designing a punishment that fit a crime I never actually committed. The ghosting everyone thinks he's doing to me, I orchestrated it. The lease I let expire, my choice. The reputation I've earned as a faithless partner. A character I invented, and then inhabited so completely that I forgot it was just a costume. So maybe the real confession isn't that I cheated and he left. Maybe it's that I loved him so much I tried to write him out of my tragedy, and in doing so, I made us both the villains of a story that could have been about something more honest than my fear. If you see him, tell him I'm not asking for forgiveness. I'm just asking him to know that the lie was the only love I had left to give.